All right. Good evening. Let's go ahead and get started. All right. I hope looks like everybody saw my message. So it seems like the verdict is we'll do some revision we'll start with at least the first 2 days. Seems like people are still not confident about the React concepts. Again, as I said in my message, these are basic and main concepts of React. If you don't understand them, you actually don't understand React. You will not be able to code, interview, or anything in React. Okay, those props and states and all that stuff, those are handling events, states, forms, looping through the arrays in React. Let's see what else did we cover. List and keys, conditional rendering, React router, those are very basic. And by basic, I don't mean like easy concept, but they are the main concept. That's what makes React. Okay, so if you don't understand them, none of the other things actually matters. So for this week, what I was planning was I was going to introduce hooks, which is again a new feature that was added in React. This was added in version 16.8 and we are on 16.12. It's only been like 6 months or so, I think. So when you if you're working on a project that has been built on React older than 16.8, right now we are on 16.12, you won't be able to use these new features anywhere. Okay. Again, we'll keep a pause on this because the reason is hooks tie into properties and state. Actually, they tie into state very well. So if you don't know how to use state, none of these actually matters. You won't actually. I mean, I can go through them. You'll see what's going on, but I don't think you will understand what is the benefit these hooks are providing. Okay. So anyway, these are kind of optional. I was going to cover um, not Redux, but there is a close to a Redux component. I think it's called Context API. Again, this only comes if you actually understand what state does. Okay, these features are actually solving some of the issues that come with state. Okay, the problem is we are not at that point. You guys are not at that point where you will actually encounter those issues with state. The problem is we can't even write or understand what a state is. That's the problem. Okay, but again, for now we'll start. We'll do some revision. I'll go through some of the activities, but my expectation is you guys are actually going to be coding. We'll do this together, but we'll be coding these activities from scratch. I know I uploaded the solved one. You can look at the solved ones. We'll pick some of them. We'll start with the props calculator. But instead of using the unsolved version, this time I want you guys to actually code everything from scratch. We'll do this together. Like, should be any code that goes into app, you guys should be creating. Anything that goes into components, you guys should be creating. So I'm going to guide you through, and I'll solve it too, but I'll be talking it aloud. I'll say, okay, go ahead and create a functional component. All right, those kind of things. So I'll give you some time to create those things, and then we'll go over, make sure that we understand each one of them. Okay, but before we can go through that, let me go back to the main concept. We'll start from components and props. All right. The second thing, I know eight people said they want the new one, so I'm still going to try to squeeze at least hooks in into the last class. But usually, what I've done in previous sessions also, I do once we get to a project week, I do conduct the class optional. Attendance is extremely low because what I say is, hey, you can go ahead and work on your projects if you want, or I'm going to cover this additional thing which has been asked, for example, Redux or State or Hooks or something else. And if you want to sit in the class and look at the lecture, it's fine. If you don't, it's up to you. Okay? Because I think we're coming to a point where you guys have to prioritize, make decisions. We're almost towards the end. Okay? If you want to learn these new things, you're welcome. If not, you can work on your projects. We'll talk about when we get to the project week. Okay. The other thing, I know at least there are three groups already ready for project. If you have not socialized for a project, you're not in a project group, I would highly recommend start getting and seeing which groups are available and forming a group. Okay, four people in a group, but they're 27, so I think one group will have three, or if and everybody else should have at least four. Okay, so three to four people. Um, what else? Yes. Again, I'm not um, required to say it's not my area, but I do care about you guys, so I'm going to say it. We are close to graduation. Actually, it's alarming number of people who are actually behind homework. Like this is probably my first class where I have had so many people that are actually not fulfilling the graduation requirement. All right. Remember, you can only skip two of the mandatory ones. I look at when I look at the sheet, there are people who have skipped a lot more. Okay, so you only have like a month or even less than a month left. I'm not sure how you're going to cover those homework, but you will probably, if you're on the list, you will probably get a call from Brent, and I hope you guys come up with a plan. I am not sure how you're going to cover that many homeworks in like a month. Okay, it's not everybody, but there are still alarming number of people. Actually, I have never had that many people skipping on homework, so I'm not sure what's going on, but I hope you work it out with Brent because he will go through and verify that you are qualified for graduation. All right. If you get a call, if you get a message from Brent, please take it seriously. Work with him. Yes, Ethan.
And that, just to clarify, that is homework that have not even been submitted for grading.
Right. Those are
saying that you got a bad grade on it.
right. We are not even talking about that. F. I'm not even going there. This is incomplete. You have actually not even submitted the assignment. This is an I. F is a different case, but I was going to talk about F, but when I saw the number of students, I was like, okay, it's not even relevant. So you have actually not even submitted or attempted the assignment. This is for those people. So if you have an I, yes, that's what it is. Okay, remember, out of all the homework, you can skip two mandatory ones. There were already two optional, so those are not even counting that. All right. Again, yeah, you will hear more from Brent, and TAs are here. You can work with them and see how you can kind of fulfill the requirements. But again, it's just a month left. I'm not sure there's what plan you guys can come up with. Yes, Bruce. Yes.
I forgot if there was like a minimum average that you had to have for the homework. Was it C all across or C for each assignment?
It was C for each assignment, C or a D. But even that's okay.
Okay.
Even if you have a D and you have submitted, you are not missing. The people I'm talking about is like there's like no submission. So if you have submitted and you have had a grade, I think you are okay. I will still vouch for you, but I will not vouch for people who have eyes all across the grade, right? As I said initially, F tells me that okay, at least you attempted something, you have given a readme, you have said okay, this is what I'm going to do, but it didn't work out, or there is some code. Okay, I will vouch for that person, but I'm not going to vouch for somebody who has an I which says I have not even submitted it. So F, D's, it's okay. Yeah. Anything else to add, Ethan? Yes, Goose.
What's gonna happen with this week's homework if we're doing a review?
Um, Right, right. So the homework actually doesn't cover the new parts that I was going to tell you guys. The homework does not cover hooks, does not cover state, like advanced state. It doesn't cover any of those. Those are something extra that I'm bringing. Usually it's like a revision week, the next one. Um, so I'm bringing those new stuff where I have the liberty to kind of introduce new stuff that is in React. The homework is going to be something that we will cover next week on schedule. There's a merge stack that is already there. You don't have to use hooks in the homework. You don't have to use advanced state. None of those. No readouts. Nothing. Yeah. Yeah. Whatever we talk about next week on Thursday and Saturday, that's going to be the homework. And you will see it doesn't talk about states and everything. It's mostly Ajax, API calls, component, props, state and life, handling events, condition, that's all the stuff. React router, that's where it is. So we'll cover that as well. Okay? So none of the advanced or the extra topics are in the homework. Any other questions before we begin? All right? Okay. So the first thing is we talked about props and state. Okay? Props and state. So what are props and state? When it comes to coding, props and state are JavaScript objects. Like anything we have studied, basically by this time you should have realized that props and state are just JavaScript objects. Okay? All right. Now they both have different functionality, and there's a reason why React gives us two JavaScript objects. Okay, but realize that props and state are objects. So when you're accessing them, when you are pulling values from it, you understand that it is an object, so you have to use dot notation or whatever to get values from it. Okay. Uh, Second thing, what is the difference between props and state? So props are read only. Okay, everybody understand? It's read only. You cannot modify props. All right. If you cannot modify props, then there has to be something that you can modify. That's where state comes in. Okay, that's the other difference. State is modifiable. When we talk about technical terms, we say immutable. So we will say immutable. Props are immutable. You cannot change props. Okay. State, on the other hand, the purpose of state is you have an object that has to change, so that's where it comes in. Okay. Um, for both of them, whenever there is a update on props or state, your page is going to be re-rendered. Okay. Remember, there is a render function in your component. The render function fires every time there is a change in state or a change in props. Okay. Just remember that. Of course, I said you cannot change props. Then what do I mean by that? Okay. But every time there's a change in props or there's a change in state, your render function fires. What does that mean? Your page is going to re-render again. Okay. It's going to go back and re-render itself again. Right. You can change a state. We understand that. We cannot change props. Where would the change come from? So props are always passed down. They are passed from parent to child, right? So props are always passed from your parent component to your child component. All right. So when I'm saying if the props change, this means that your parent, whatever data that it is passing to the props to your child, something changes over here is going to re-render the child component. All right, that's what it means when I say if props change. All right, we'll come back to that. We'll see in the code in a bit. All right, the other thing that I already talked about, props are passed down. They always flow top-down approach. All right, props are being passed from your parent component to your child component. Okay, and how are they passed? They are passed as um, it's passed like HTML attributes. All right, take this term very loosely. Don't use it, but for understanding purposes, just as you have HTML attributes, that's how props are passed. Okay, but your props are passed from your child and component. from your parent to your child component. Now, if you are debugging, if you are looking for a prop, if you are trying to say, hey, my component is getting some props, okay, some data, where do I look into which component, where this data is coming from? Always look at the parent one. So you need to find out, okay, my component is receiving some data. It has to be coming from a parent component, and that's where you need to go and look for it. Okay, the child cannot modify the props, of course. Okay, since props are read-only, you cannot modify the props. All right. Now, when we talk about props or properties, if your component is only using props, make sure that it is a function component. You don't have to have a class component for this case. So, if your component is using only props, that component is called functional component, right? Why is it called a functional component? Because you are going to use a function to define that component. That's why it's called a functional component. Okay, simple. All right, and how do props come into it? It's going to be an argument. It's going to be a parameter in your function. That's all. Okay, when we talk about state, state is a object, JavaScript object that is local to a component. Okay, state lives and dies in a component. It is not visible outside. It cannot be passed from a parent to a child. A state is something that is local to a component. Okay, now I said state cannot be passed to a different component. You can pass state, but remember it's going to be passed as a property, and we'll look at some examples. But basically, when we talk about state, state is something that is local to a component. Okay. The other thing, any other component state is invisible to any other component. No other component can tell whether the other component is using the state or not. Okay. So the component that has state, we call it a stateful component. Okay. No other component can verify, can tell whether any other component is a stateful component or a stateless component. Right? Again, why? Because state is local. It only resides in a component. That's the definition of state. Okay. Anytime state changes, what happens? Your render functions fires and your page is going to be re-rendered. All right. Props change, your page gets rendered. Your state changes, your page re-renders. Okay. Now, for props we use function component. For state, you have to use a class component. All right. A state cannot exist as a function component, so you have to have a class component. Every time you come to a point where you are going to be using state in a component, it has to be a class component. All right. So for a state, you have to create a class component. All right. Now, props are read-only. You cannot modify props, so that's where it stops. State you can modify. All right. But there is a method. If you want to update the state, you are going to use a method called setState. This is the only way you can update a state. Okay. You cannot assign a value to the state directly. You have to use a method called setState to update your state. Okay. So class component, if you want to update the state, you're going to use the setState method. State is local, so it cannot be accessed. It should not be visible outside the component. It's actually not possible. What else? Any questions on concept or any other questions that you have come across when it comes to properties or state? Is that clear? Everybody understand? Okay. All right. So that is the basic definition when it comes to components and props. All right. So the first thing we will do is we'll do an activity on props, and we will start with the calculator activity. All right. So remember in your calculator, and this is You can look at the solution, but you are going to type this in. You're not going to use the unsolved one and then create this. We're going to create a calculator app on our own. So remember, there is a parent component called app, right? If you look at the solved one, then you have a calculator component, okay? And then calculator component has a math component, all right? So what do we have to do? You're going to create an app, and then the first thing you're going to do is add a component, a function component called calculator, okay? And then you're going to add another function component called math, okay? So two function components, calculator and math. And the flow would be this. The parent for calculator is going to be app, and the parent for math is going to be calculator. Okay? So there should not be any import of math component in your app component. Okay? So that's the first thing we are going to do. So create, use your React app, and then go ahead and create these function components. So what I have, I have a single app that I'm going to be using throughout the class, and I'm going to be removing my source files and bringing in new ones. So for example, I have demo app. Okay. This one has our basic source. Okay. And then what I have is a starter source. So what do I mean by this is I'm going to delete this source, and I am going to bring this source file in. Okay, again, this source does not have anything. It's just a plain app.js that I have created, which I have removed icons and everything. It's a simple app. Every activity that I'm going to do, I'm going to be using the same source as a starting point. Okay, this would be my app. I'm going to delete this. For the next lookup, I'll complete the calculator one over here. And then once this is done, I'm going to remove the source, and I'm going to bring this source again so that I have a fresh starting point. That's all this app does. Okay. For you guys should have some different, hopefully you have different Create React apps so that you don't have to overwrite the activities again and again, because it's better if you guys keep a record of each activity that you are working on so that you have something to go by. Again, the solutions are already there, so that's already a reference that you guys should have. Okay, so if you want to look at this solution, this is activity number 23 from 19. Okay, but I don't want you guys to be copying any stuff over. Right, this is important for us to understand each one of these activities. So for example, I have this. Let me in this one. So we get my app. Okay, so my boilerplate code just does a hello, and that's what I have in my app. All right. Does everybody have the calculator and the math component? To create a function component, one should be calculator and one is going to be math. Two function components. So I have my components folder. I have my calculator, and then I have my math. I'm going to create calculator. So my JavaScript file, test, and then I have my CSS. Okay, empty files. I will do the same thing here for my component. So math.css. Okay. The next step is to stub them out. All right. So you're going to create a function component in calculator.js, and then you're also going to create a function component for math.js. Once you have them, for just testing purposes, add a hello world in both of these components, and at least in the calculator one, and then run it so that it kind of shows up on your screen. Okay, there's no logic yet, we are just stubbing them out. Mm-hmm.
When she tries to get over localhost, it actually puts slash index.html in the actual URL. Like the URL is public slash index.html. I can't quite figure out why that would be, rather than just localhost 3000.
Yeah, is it on the right path? Might be it's on
It's
the.
on the forward slash. It's just on the get on the forward slash.
Oh no, but the folder structure is public outside. It's on the same path.
Yeah,
That
we
could
can take
be.
a look at the structure of where public
Yeah.
is, because that might be why.
Right. It should be outside.
Because
on
she's
the
got this
root folder.
static. She's
Yeah.
got the static
Okay.
public folder, but
Yeah.
I'll double check where the actual public
That
folder
could be
is.
why it's.
Okay.
Yeah, could be
If
one of
it's
those.
tucked in somewhere.
Yeah,
else.
yeah. So just looks up the index HTML
Right,
and
right.
puts it on.
Okay.
All right. Do we have the two components stubbed out? Again, it's just there's no logic inside it right now. Okay. So import React from React. Okay. I'm going to import our CSS file. And then we are going to create our function component. Function component starts with Either you can use a function syntax or you can use the arrow function. So I've been using arrow function, so I'm going to stick to that. For arrow function, we need to have a name, right, is equal to parameters arrow on this. Okay, so that's how you define a function component. Is just a component that is using a function. All right. At the bottom, do a export because we are going to be using this component in our app, right? App.js. So export default calculator. Okay. Every function component should be returning something. Should be returning JSX. All right. So we need to, in our function body, we need to have our return statement. All right. If we, so for now we will just return our div and say this is calculator component. All right. No properties, no nothing right now. It just stubbed out basic version of a function component. Any questions on that? Does everybody has this code or not? Okay. Anytime I say a function component or you are making a function component, this is the first thing that you should be doing. Importing, creating a function, just return a normal div. There's no logic in it yet. All right. How do we test it out? Remember our diagram over there, calculator's parent is going to be app, so I need to go to my app.js and call this calculator component. All right, so how do I do it? The first thing is I need to import the calculator component. So import calculator from dot slash components slash calculator and my JavaScript file. Okay. Now in my div, I can simply call my calculator component closing tag. Okay, remember JSX requires a closing tag. Right. Now when you run, you should see the text that we have in our calculator component. All right, so it says this is calculator component. Let's look into our inspect, look into our component tab for our React, and so I have app. All right, that's my diagram on the board, and then within app I have my calculator. Okay, so this is the structure that I'm looking for. Works for now. All right, any questions? Does everybody has this code, understand this code? Okay, yes, questions? Which one? The app.js? Do what? Again, this activity is not supposed to be copied as I'm typing. It should be done. Give it a try first. See what error you are getting. I would prefer if you write this on your own, get an error, and then kind of come back and see it. Okay? Again, the solution is already there. If you are just waiting for me to do it and copy it, it kind of defeats the purpose of revision. So please give it a try. Give it an honest attempt before you look into the solution. Okay? So, in the same pattern, create a math component and then look at the diagram. Where should the math component be called? The first thing is create a function component, call it math. Okay? And then looking at the diagram, call the math component. Again, it's going to be similar to the calculator. Just add a div. We are just stubbing it out before we actually put in some logic. So create a math component. It's going to be a function component, and make sure it is called inside the parent. Alright, so import React from React. Okay. Import, I'm going to import my CSS file. Alright, function component. Const math. For now, no parameters, arrow function. Here's my component. Export default math. Okay, should have a return statement. So return something. For now, we will just return a div and then say this is math component. Alright? So now we have our math component. Doesn't do anything, it just outputs this is math component on string. Alright? So go back to your page. Still shows calculator component, doesn't show math in the tree. Okay, how do we connect our math component to our app? Call it in the calculator. Why? Because that's the design. The parent for math is going to be calculator. So instead of inside of app, I have to call my math over here. Okay. Import math from so we are already has to go one up there. Math dash math. Okay. And then let's call math order. Okay. If this is what you did, there's an error. Why is there an error? Right? There can be only one parent. So in this case, these are siblings. These are not, there's no parent-child relationship. You can only have a top parent and then something. So this component has to be inside this div. Okay, so we'll put this over here. And that should fix that. Okay. Now when you render, you should see both text coming up. If you go into your components tab on your browser, and then look at the tree, and this is what we are going for: app, then calculator, then math. Okay, that's the first thing. So whenever you are coming, you're doing an activity, draw it out, make sure you understand what is the relationship before you start even coding, right? When you have the relationship correct, then it's easier to look at the next set of problems. All right, any questions? Everybody got it? Okay. No questions? All right. So the next part of this activity was that you need to create this calculator, and you need to pass in some data into the math component. Okay? If you are trying to pass any data, it has to go from calculator and it has to go inside the math component. All right? There is three things that you need to pass into your math component. The first is a number, then operator, and then another number. So first number and operator, and then second number. Okay? So for example, 1 plus 2, this is what you need to pass into your math component. All right? And how do we pass from parent to a child? We use properties. Okay? So your math component is going to expect some properties, so we will call them props. All right. Again, remember props is an object, so this object is going to have three fields: first number, an operator, and a second number. Okay, and these are defined with whatever the parent has defined them. All right. So for example, if we go back over here. All right. If I pass in saying num1 is equal to 1, okay, operator is equal to plus, okay. What does this mean? My math component is receiving three properties. All right, the property names are num1, operator, and num2. Okay. By default, these are strings. If you have to pass in a number, you have to wrap it around into curly braces. Okay. Now, how is this received in my math component? These are received as an object called props. So the easiest way is go into your browser, look into the components, and click on your math component, and you will see this. It will show you exactly what properties it is being passed. All right, it's getting num1 as 1, integer, and then operator. Okay. You can do the same thing if I call this math component again. I can pass in different set of values. Num1, 3, a different operator, and then some other number. Okay, so now if you go back to your browser, look into the components, you will see that it is rendering two components, right? Calculator has now two components. Both are math, but it is rendering two different components. Okay, the first one is receiving 1, 2, and plus. If you click on the second one, it's receiving 3, 1, and a minus. Okay, so same component, different properties. All right, React is going to render them as totally independent and different components, even though they both are same. This is where the reusability part comes in. So you create one component and then you can reuse them with different values. All right, let me go ahead and remove this. We don't need this for now. Okay. For now, let me show you one more thing. So if you have a tag, right, still the same thing. I have the math tag. Let me comment this out so you can see. Okay. If you type in anything between the starting and the ending tab, let's say this is in between start and end tags. Okay. Now if you go back to your browser, click on math, you will see you still have properties. You have num1, num2 operator, and then there is a new property added, children. Okay, so anything that is passed in between the starting and the ending JSX tag, React is going to wrap everything up into a single property called children, and it's going to be passed as that. Okay, the word children is fixed. It is coming from React. If you look at the code, we have not defined this keyword. We have not defined any property called children. By default, anything that is between the starting and an ending tag of your JSX element, this will be put into a property called children, and it's going to be passed into your math component, your child component. Okay, if you don't have any property, for example, this one, if you don't have any ending tag, there's nothing in the between, then nothing gets passed. So if you look at the second one, there's no children property over here. Okay, anything that is between in this tag as an attribute gets passed into the properties. Anything that is between the starting and the ending tag, this is wrapped around a property called children, and it gets passed into a child component as a children. Okay, any questions? No questions? I'm going like really, really slow. Yes.
So you could maybe have, well, I don't know if you want to, but pass more components in there.
Exactly. Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can pass another math component within it. Yeah, it will come as a children. So what Chris is saying, can I pass more components inside it? Yes, you can. Right now we don't have anything. We only have math components, so it's kind of like if you do math. Okay. So now what is going to happen? It's getting a little bit confusing, but what Chris is saying is I can pass anything in between, yes, and it will be passed as a children property. For example, my children property initially had a string. This time it has another JSX tag. It doesn't matter, okay? But it is always going to come inside this field called children, all right? And you can pass anything. And passing in different components as children, it's not uncommon. You will see some examples where we do that. So within my starting and my ending, for my first method, I'm passing it the same
Or
one.
does it render that?
Huh?
Does it render that way?
No, it won't render. It's going to pass it. You have to do something with it. You have to extract this out and do something with it. Yes, it's not going to render. Okay, we can see how do we access that. Well, it's a children property, but okay. Now we have our things that are being passed in. How do we use them? This is my props over here. This is where you use. So you would refer to them as props dot num1, props dot num2, props dot operator. Okay, go ahead and show each one of them in the div so that we can see what each one of them is available. For example, if I create a p tag, okay, and I want to show these properties, how do I access them? Using curly braces. Um, props dot, the first one was called num1, so you can output num1. The second was operator. Okay, and this was num2. Okay, so if you go back to your code now, you should be able to see all of these components being loaded. So why do I see more than one? Because I have two components that are being loaded. So I will see this is coming from num1, operator, and num2. Okay, so this is how you would access these properties. The children one, remember, it was called children, so you would say children, okay, and then you should be able to see the text over here. Okay, any questions? So do we understand where the properties originate? How do we pass that in, and how do we access these properties? No questions? Everybody good? Everybody understands this? Okay. Now, will you be able to complete the calculator activity? Not you, Rina. Yes. Not the 8 people who said move on. The other 17 or 18 people. Let me see. The other 19 people. Yeah. Is it good? Will you guys be able to solve the calculator now? Okay, got it? All right. All right, so let's do the next one, the friends one. That's a little bit more tricky. I think it's more close to your homework as well. Okay. So for the friends one, what do we have? Let's look at this. Okay. So this is a web page that is given to you. You have to design your React app using this as a reference. Okay. To make it easy, you already have your components defined for you. So you have 4 components. The first one is called app, which should already be there once you create your React app. The second component is called wrapper, right? At the bottom, if you look at this diagram, it's called wrapper. Okay. The third component is called title, and the fourth one is called friend card. Okay. As a starting point, all 4 of them are function components. Okay. The first one is already defined for you. All the remaining 3 are function components. Okay. So the first task is in your new React app, go ahead and create the remaining 3 function components. Just stub it out just as we did in our calculator app. Okay, so you're going to create 3 function components. One is going to be called wrapper, title, and friend. Okay, we haven't even defined the relationship. We are just defining 3 components. All right, they are not going to be imported anywhere. We are just defining. So just go ahead and define 3 components called wrapper, title, and friend card. So I'm going to close this. I am going to delete my source folder, and then I'm going to bring out my fresh one, the basic, where is it? Starter template. Okay. Okay. App.js doesn't do anything, just a hello. So I'll make sure this is running. npm start. Okay, so we are creating 3 components. Wrapper, title, and friend card. Am I going too slow? Can I speed up or is this okay? No, not the 9 people. It's the remaining 18. Speed up or not? No? Okay. Alright. Okay. So we are creating 3 function components. Alright, so wrapper, title, and friend. So wrapper. Oh, I didn't see if this is actually running. Oh yeah, it is. So wrapper. Oops. Title and friend card. Friend card. Okay. Friend card dot js and copy the name. Test.js and then .css. Okay. So my title, title, title. Okay, and then I have my class. Wrapper. Okay, so I'm at 3 components. Just created the folder structure. They don't have any code. Okay, so I'm going to open my friend, title, and wrapper.js, and these are the 3 files that I'm going to create function components. All right. Hopefully everybody has stubbed this out. So I'm going to quickly create these 3. So import React from React. Okay. Import the CSS file. In this case, it's important because we'll be copying some CSS. I'm not going to be writing the CSS. I'm going to copy the CSS and then we'll put it over here. So we'll call it const friend card. For now, empty. Okay. Return. All right. Add a empty div. All right. And then export default friend card. All right. So I'm just going to make this into title. So this will be our title. This will become title and title. Okay. Same thing with the wrapper, just stubbing them out. This will become wrapper. This is wrapper and this is wrapper. All right. Does everybody has those stubbed out? No logic, nothing, just function components. All right. So, looking at the diagram, I mean, it's already given to you. Let's create our relationship tree, a component tree. All right. So, it looks like from the diagram, my app is the parent component as usual. Within the app component, there is a wrapper. So, I have my app on the top, one child, wrapper. Okay. And then within wrapper, 2 more children, right? So these 2 components, title and friend, are inside the wrapper. Okay, so the relationship with them is title, and friend card. All right, does everybody understand the relationship? That's what it aligns with the diagram that you have. Okay, so go ahead and create this relationship. How do we create it? Use the import um, in your app, kind of create this relationship. All right. Um, Again, this is more on your app. So within your app, you're going to have a wrapper component. Within the wrapper component, you're going to render these two as siblings. Okay. So what I mean is, if you go back to your app, okay, let's go and remove this. So instead of div, we'll render our wrapper. Okay. Why didn't it import? There. Okay. So my wrapper component app, and then within my wrapper, I'm going to render the two child components, which are going to be title and friend. So title, okay, and then friend card is going to be the sibling for this one. So friend card. Okay. Any questions? Does everybody understand? Look at the diagram, look at the tree structure, and look how we have done this. Okay? Still parent-child relationship. This time we moved it to our app. That's the only difference. But still parent-child relationship. So wrapper is the parent, and then within the wrapper there are two different components, which are siblings to each other, but they are children to wrapper component. Okay? Just to make sure, go and run your app and then look into inspect, okay, the components, and just to be sure that this is our relationship. Okay, so if you look at the props over here, these two are being passed as children. Any question? Do you guys see why this is happening? This is the same question that Chris was asking the previous one. Yes. It's just a function, it doesn't do anything. Not yet. It's not working for you? No, you. If you call rapid, or you are trying to call itself again in itself. It should be. You are already in your rapid.js. Okay. Any questions on the? Does everybody see what is happening over here? Why don't the two components show up in the component tree, and why do they show up instead in the children properties? Do you guys see it? You guys understand that or not? Good. Okay. Why are they showing up as children? Because if you look at app.js, within the JSX tags, I'm passing in something. So these two will be passed as a property called children. Okay. So this is what Chris was asking. Anything that you pass in between the JSX tag, this is tagged as uh, props as children. Okay. So your app component is passing these being as children. Okay, so your wrapper component, if you go back to your wrapper component and then say props dot children, you should be able to pull out title and friend card. Okay, so for example, let's do this. Let's put in something so that you guys can see. This is title component. Okay, This is friend component. Okay. And then in my wrapper, I'm going to receive props. All right. If you go back to app, wrapper is passing these two props, which are going to be children. All right. So go back to over here, and then if you say props dot children, okay, there's your text. Oops, friend. Okay, again, why props are children? Because they are in between the JSX tags. So in your props, they are being wrapped inside the children prop. All right. Any question? Does everybody understand what is happening? Relationship before we start coding the wrapper and the title and the friend. Any questions?
You found this one, right? You cross that something bracket 0.
You can do. Looks like this is an array, so you could do one. I haven't tried it. Yeah. Okay. Again, forget what you saw. We were just testing some theories. Yes.
Do people do that a lot, or do they just import a component inside the component in the
It just depends. Usually, I've seen is importing. Yeah. Yeah. Good. All right. So let's start with the easier one first. So we're going to use the wrapper. If you go to your solution, you can pull out the CSS. I'm not going to write the CSS, so I'm just going to see what the CSS is in my solution. I'm just going to copy the CSS over for my wrapper. So in my wrapper component, in my wrapper CSS, I'm just going to, no, wrong. I'm going to bring over the CSS. Okay, looks like there's some nice CSS here. All right, and then in my wrapper component, I am going to call this class name, and it is called wrapper dot wrapper. Okay, so I'm going to call this CSS class in my wrapper component. I'm going to render this. That should be it. Okay, so if you go back over here, that looks nicer. Okay, all I did was, and you guys can do the same thing, copy over the CSS that's in your solution. It's inside the wrapper folder, I think. Yeah, it's called style.css. I'm calling it wrapper.css. We already imported it, so all you have to do is once you copy that over, you should be able to access it with the class name. Yes, it's in the components and wrapper folder. Oh, the activity number 24. You can start with 24, 25. All of them are same. Yeah. The CSS never changes. You can pick up from 24. Yeah. Okay. Do the same thing with title now. Copy over the CSS. Okay. Take a stab at this one. So what is title doing? Title is just rendering this text. Looks like a H1. All right. Use the CSS from the solution. Bring it over to your title CSS. And then in your title, from your app.js, pass in the title text. Over here right now it's empty. Pass in the text, which is going to be friends list. Pass that title. In your title component, have an h1 and this render pops.children, and you should be able to see the title on the top. Okay? Pass in the title from your app between the JSX. It's going to come as children. pull it out in your title.js, show it in an h1 tag. So remember, similar to your wrapper, we are rendering wrapper in a div tag. You can use h1, import over the CSS for title from the solution, put it in your title.css if that's the naming convention you're following, and just call props.children, update your app.js, pass in the title, and it should show up on your page. This code is for wrapper. I'm talking about the title. Title right now is just an M, so we'll have to update this. So in my title, I want to say, what is it? Friends list. So this is going to be friends list. Okay. Since I'm passing some data between the JSX starting and the ending tag, my title component is going to receive friends list as a children. Okay. In the children property. So to access that, first of all, I need to add my parameter called props. All right. I was saying render this in an h1 tag, so I'm going to change this to h1. Okay. And how do I access that? I would simply say props.children. Okay. No CSS yet, but it should show up my friend's title, and there it is. Kind of messed up, so we'll have to add that CSS. Okay. Let's go back to our solution. I'm going to copy over the CSS for title, bring it over to my title.css, paste it here. Okay. And then in my title.js, I am going to add a class name, and this is called title. Okay. You should see a better title on the top. What is the error that I'm getting? Okay. Oops. It's fine. It's looking for the icon. Is my CSS looking for an icon? Let's see. Color, text decoration. No. That's weird. Okay. So do you guys have this working? So same thing as wrapper. Instead of title, I'm passing the title from my app.js. All right. We pass in the title. It gets rendered. Applies some CSS, and it shows up like this. Okay. So my friend list. Around this is my wrapper. Okay, so this part is done, my wrapper, and then my friend list. The next part, we'll take a break and then we'll work on the friend card. Any questions so far? Is everybody on track with this app? We have these two components completed. We're not going to be modifying them. It's good? No? Are you getting any errors? All right, let's take a break and we'll help bring it out. All right, we'll start at 8 o'clock. How far do you get?
So that's what I thought.
I think it's more. I didn't get a chance to So, is it within trilogy or is it within trilogy? What is I can do?
So it might be. And what I was doing on the other one,
What is
so then I switched it, so then I started doing the other one, and this one.
I didn't know I could start doing that because I was beginning to realize it.
Yeah. Excited?
Yes, very small, but
Okay. Yeah, I see a lot of engineering posts on Reddit or to you, whatever they're calling. I know they're looking for some people like students, but I would say just do networking and talk to some people get an internship or something or try somebody.
you remember Jason was telling me about?
Yeah.
Actually, it's
Okay. Congratulations. Yeah, I know how it is.
oh yeah, you're not allowed to leave from
From what?
teaching here. You're not allowed to leave.
Teaching here? Yeah, no, I'm here. Oh. No, yeah. I'm doing the next cohort. They offered me.
Well, I literally
What is it?
told
What is it?
That's what you pay for.
That is what?
Chippins, right?
What
He's
is
the
it?
owner of the entire company, Chip.
Oh, the new owner? Yeah. Okay.
So I was talking to him and I was like, if there are certain instructors, I feel like no matter how much money they ask for, you should keep them around.
Oh.
And he was like,
Wow, look at that.
You don't have to worry about that. I've already that part covered, so they've already raised me to the maximum.
So with you have like a base file of NPX, right? Just everything ready to go,
NPX create React app, yes.
right? Because that's where I get so far behind because I'm trying to figure out how you did that so quick.
No, that's
But you
remember.
have
That's what I said. You have to create it
Right.
before class. If you do it over here, it's not going
right
to happen.
now it's making sense again.
It's not going to work.
Um,
Yeah. We'll get left behind
So
if you.
right, that's what happened.
Do you
in
have
last
one
class.
created?
Now I just created.
Okay, so have one. What you do is when we complete this activity, copy this source folder, save it somewhere else, and then put
That's
a
all I
new
need
one.
is the source folder.
Yeah, everything remains the same.
Okay.
Right. So I have a source folder, which I separated it out, which is what I did was okay, but I don't see the folders here.
So for this class tomorrow, I'm gonna go back and watch the feed to catch myself back up to what you just did.
Okay, so like I have this source folder. I just keep copying this over in the same app, so I don't have to like redo the whole thing. So once I'm done with this, right, what I would do is I would delete this folder which has all my solution. I don't need them. I mean, what you would do is you would create a copy and save it.
Right.
I will remove this. I will copy this folder again, source, which is my again starting fresh point.
Okay. So that's okay.
But you still need to have this create React app done and everything. I'm just changing the folder. If you change the folder structure, like rename it, bring it over with the same name, React is happy. But if you modify anything else over here, then that's where React freaks out. So I'm not modifying it. I'm just changing this.
So the other way, I could just keep it like this. And
Yes.
at the beginning of the class go up here and save it as something else.
No, that's not even. That's what I'm saying.
It won't work that way.
It won't work. React is going to if you try to. Yeah, no, that will work.
As a base.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Without touching
Yes,
nothing,
yes.
just go and save it as something
Yes.
else, and then go from there on that one. And then if I need it again, go back to the original, save as, and go back. Right.
Right. So
Okay.
that's that. No. That's where the problem is. So let's suppose you created a folder called activity one,
Uh-huh.
right? And this is what you use the npx create react
Right.
create, right? Now, if you take this, make a copy of it, and rename it, like say activity two, just simple copy paste, not anything. Give it a try. It's not. I don't think it's going to work. I think I've tried it. What happens is React has some configurations which are tied to this name over here. If you rename the main folder, it freaks out and it's going to say, "Oh, you're going to see a bunch of it." So what I suggest is either you create a bunch of npx like 10 apps and keep it, okay, or you create one, and within this activity, the source folder just keep replacing the source folder. Then it's okay.
So keep a master source and just pull
Yes,
back
create
over.
create a new activity, new demo, whatever template.
Okay.
Take the source app, a source folder, keep it somewhere else. Okay. Now what you can do is you can modify this source, add your component, everything. When this is good, remove this, bring the starter one again, copy paste it. Then it's going to keep working. As long as the same name, everything else is same, it works. But if you rename this, copy this whole folder, rename it, that's when the React freaks out and it'll be like, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. There's no.
That's what I was getting.
Yeah,
Like,
you can make it work, but you'll have to go into package.json and modify some names, and I think it's big effort. So it's kind of keeping track of these names everywhere. So that's why it kind of freaks out. So that's why I don't copy the whole folder. Don't mess with it. I only mess with the folder inside, which is the source folder.
Okay, and then this
Yeah.
is where we put the component. Right.
Yeah, this is the only folder you will be working on for
Okay.
now. Yes.
Okay, that's making sense. Now. That's where I was.
Yeah,
So
that's what I was
you're
saying.
doing, but I'm
Yeah,
getting like, it's so far ahead, and I'm just like,
yeah.
all right.
So that's what I was saying. Create before class.
That
In
makes
class,
sense.
it's not.
Yeah.
It's going to take you like a minute or two just for that to run.
Right.
Yeah.
Now it's making sense how you do that. Okay,
Okay.
thanks. Appreciate
All right.
that.
Mhm.
Really? It's close. Everybody goes to I'm sure we could have walked out of it, but I mean, on the one that we did, it was copy paste. Yeah, and then because I remember somebody asked me, like, there was an easier way, and I was like, I tried to do it for you. But I kind of no, I think this has to happen as well. Yeah, I think it has to be very I think so too, but I can't like how. Yeah, but it's all just outside of the
No, like all of our outlets. You can't just I've never heard of the credit card itself has no control. It's a only use what it's Dallas are excited. So the app is controlled by what's called.
Which is,
You know, normally too, you don't necessarily want to get each sided, but that's the idea. If we're sending it out.
The ground, you don't have to ground it. You can just take, you can take this down. Well, you're ground.
really,
So, you know,
unless you only
well, the child cats are full of two.
it's all responsive.
She had like one time, like one
I've noticed that that's what gets me too. It's like that.
Yes.
So I have a question regarding this structure. None of these files except your app file is importing another file.
No.
So if that's the case, why don't you have app going down to 3 rather than actually
And I've been
You're right. When you look at um, the tree structure, when you look at your this over here in your component, you're right. It kind of stops. You see how I did it? So that's what I was trying to draw it over. Even though the import is not within it, but when you render it, when you use the child, the way you're rendering it, it still creates the same component key. It's just another way to do the same thing that we saw in the previous cycle. So you have two choices. Either you can import, you can remove title and friend from your app, put it over here,
that was
and do it, or you can do this way. So I just want to show you both ways. It depends on your use case, what your preference is. But yes, you can only do this.
but you
And then
should
take these two, put it over here, and then you have to write some code over here. Okay. I was just trying to show you properties example. So these are being passed as properties so that you guys can see. That's how it is. But yes. But if you look at React app in your component, you will see it still renders as a component tree that I did. That's why I kind of follow this. App, wrapper, and
Yeah,
do you have the component installed? React developer tool?
that's what I was first thinking. I have it. I downloaded it. I don't. Oh.
Should have added
Oh
to it.
yeah.
So you should see it.
There it
Yeah,
is.
there you go.
Right. Okay.
So that's I mean, anytime you are doing React, always inspect over here and see what's going on. So now you can see the wrapper. It's passing these children as properties. Okay, and then your wrapper, if you go in your code, you are rendering these two children.
Right. Okay, but this is not the same. Like when you have components nested within a component, that's not the same as like wrappers importing title.
Yeah. The other, but when your component tree comes up, it's still the same thing. Remember, if you look at your inspect right now, it's
Yeah.
showing up you as a same tree. React to React, it doesn't matter. It's going to render it the same way. But yes, the other way you can, not right now, but give it a try. Create a wrapper in your app. Only import wrapper, and then in your wrapper class you can import title and friends.
And does this import both of them? Or does it import
Wrap-
one which
App
imports?
imports wrapper. Wrapper imports both of them. Why? Because they are siblings. Because they are siblings. Siblings have to be imported, but your parent-child is. But since these are like right next to each other, you're going to import both of them. There's no parent-child relationship. You see, they both are siblings, which means they both are the parent for both of them is wrapper, so it has to be inside the wrapper.
Right. I remember I was doing some activity where it looked like. Oh, actually, I think this is it. Yeah, the math one. So
Yeah.
in the math one, they look like siblings.
Oh no, don't
Because
go
they're
by
in
this
the
structure.
It's just by the
No.
import structure.
Is that
Yeah, because if you look at this one, they all look similar. If you minimize these, it looks
right?
similar.
Okay.
No, folder structure has nothing to do with the page structure.
Got it.
Yeah. No.
Okay. Cool. Thank you. Thanks.
All right. Let's continue our example. So we have two of these components completed. The first one is already done for us, so we don't have to worry about that. Uh, the last component is a friend card. That's what we'll be working on. Okay. Um, if you look at individually, this is what we are going to stub it out first. All right. So we have a image. So you will create a div. Within the div, you will have an image. All right. And then within that image at the bottom, you have looks like a UL, like a list, unordered list with these three things. Okay. Now, again, same thing. Copy over the CSS for friends card. Bring it over. Look at the class names and stub out just this one thing. Okay. I think you would need a image as well. Um, let's see. Where's my image folder? Is it there? Mm, oh, it's pulling from the internet. Okay, you don't have to worry about images for now. Okay, so what we are creating is a main div, another div with a card class, and then an order list. Okay, you can refer to the solved solution if you want, but we are just stubbing, we're just creating this component. We are not passing anything. We are not dealing with properties right now. We are just creating a simple card over here, okay, in our friend class. So wrapper is done, title is done. We are doing this in our friend.js. Okay, so main div with the class name, let's see, card, and then within those, so you will have a main div called card for this one. Then within that card div, you are going to create two more divs, one for the image and one for the content. Right? Look at the CSS. The class names are there. Names for image, container, and content. Just create them, and then we will see how do we pass in properties to this component. So the first thing is copy over the CSS. So I'm going to copy over the CSS to my friend.css, friend card. Okay. So I have dot card. That's going to be my first div. Then I have image container. Is that my second? And then there is a content CSS. So a main div and then two child divs. So basically, so a main div for the whole. property. So a main div for the card and two child divs. So the battery ran out for this one. Yes. Okay, so this is going to be the class name card. That will be our main. Okay, and then this will be our image. So class name, what is it? img dash. So just copy this. Okay, and this last div is going to be for our content. So this would be class name content. Okay, so we just stub these out and we'll fill each one of them. All right, so that's what I was saying. So we have a image and then we have our content. All right, so let's go ahead and see how this renders. Okay, it renders, should be getting this thing. All right, simply we just did our divs and called our classes. There's no data, there's nothing over here. Okay, first thing I would recommend is, since we will be pulling the data from our JSON file, go ahead and copy the JSON over as well. From the solution is called friends.json. So I'm going to copy that file over and bring it to my root folder. Is it inside the app? It's inside the source folder. Okay, so I'm going to bring the friends.json and I'm going to put it inside my source folder. Okay, so if you see this, I have a source. Within that source folder, I copied over the friends.json. All right, friends.json is coming from the solution or the unsolved folder that was given to you. Okay, let's go back to our friends card. All right, so the first one is complete. In our image container, what do we have to render? We are going to render an image. So let's go ahead and create our image tag. All right, and then within our image tag, we have our two attributes, alt and source. We'll keep it empty right now because we don't have anything. We'll pass this in as properties. Okay. Within our content, we are going to create a unordered list. There's my, right, with 1, 2, and 3. So UL with 3 LIs. So create a UL and then three LIs. Okay. These LIs are going to have name, occupation, and location. So let's go ahead and add those. Let's make it bold. So name, there's going to be name, and then we'll have occupation, and the last property is location. Okay, so far so good. Again, this is all stubbed out. There's no properties, no nothing going on. Okay, we are just stubbing it out. Next, we will go ahead and fill this out with our properties. How do we pass those in, and we'll take a look at how do we do that. All right. Everybody good? Any questions? Good. This is how it shows up for me. All right. So now we need to pass in this data. We need to pass in data for image. We need to pass in data for name, occupation, and location. All right. Where is the data going to come from? Which component? Which component is the data going to come from? No. This component doesn't know anything about the JSON. To this component, where the data is going to come from? From the parent component, from over here somewhere. Okay. Friend component doesn't know anything about JSON. It is just expecting that you're going to pass the data as properties. Okay, it's going to be passed in. It doesn't care where the data is coming from. Okay. Yes, over here we are going to import our friend JSON, and we are going to pass those stuff inside it. Okay, so let's look at our friend JSON file. Look at the properties. We have ID, name, image, occupation, and location. So we are going to pass all of these as properties. Okay, so it's going to be props.id, props.name, image, occupation, and location. All right, so my friend card is going to receive data in props. Okay, as an image source, it has to be props.image because this is what I need to pass in. All right, so my source can be replaced with props.image. Okay, alt, let's take a look at this. We can put the name. Okay, so this would become props.name. Okay, now again, remember, I'm not passing this data yet, right? I am just filling my child component with the expectations that I'm going to receive properties with these names. And why am I saying that? Because I'm looking at the JSON, and this is a more logical way to pass the same names. Okay, so again, if you render this right now, it's not going to work. Why? Because we are not passing these properties yet from our app.js. Okay, we are just stubbing these out. Okay, what about the name? Name is going to be props.name. So same property over here. Okay, occupation is going to be props.occupation. So we can copy this name. Okay, and this is going to be props.location. Okay, everybody clear? Are we good? Questions? Good. All right, now if you render it, it's going to not render. If you look at console, probably errors because I'm not passing these properties yet. All right, so we will go into our, we'll close this out, into our app. This is my friend card. Over here, I need to pass in those properties. Okay, so we'll go ahead and do that. Before that, let's go ahead and import our friends array from should be over here, unless I did not copy it correctly. I did not. Oh, no, I did. Okay. So this is my source. Inside my source, I have my friend JSON. So, okay, this should work. All right. Now remember, friends, when we import it, an array is coming back. So each one element of the array is going to be your each property. All right, so I'm going to close this out over here because I'm not going to pass anything in between. Props, so my first prop is going to be name. Okay, and how am I accessing this name? I'm getting it from my array called friends. Oops. Okay. It's an array, so first index dot name. Okay. So test it out. If you go back to your page, you should at least see the name showing up, and it does. Okay, and we use the same name in the alt, so it kind of shows up. All right, complete this. I'll put it in a new line so that it's a little easier to see. My second property is image, and from my array, it's going to be friends 0 dot image. Okay, so my image shows up now. Then my occupation property, I'm going to pass it as friends index 0 dot occupation. Okay. Ooh. Occupation shows up. Oh, occupation is, if I click, oh yeah. And then the last one is location property, and I am passing that as friends first index dot location, and I should see this thing. All right, any question? Does everybody understand what just happened? All right, we are passing the data in as properties. All right, we are pulling the properties from an array. It's kind of similar to your homework. I think I was looking, Goose was asking something, so I saw it's kind of look like a similar example. You have an array and you're passing data from that array. Okay, now if you want to render a second component, a second friend card, it's the same thing. You can reuse the same component instead of creating a new one. The only difference would be you will pass it as a different index. So you would say this would be index 1, 1, 1. Okay, so if I go back over here, I should see 2. Okay, this array has 3, so let's go ahead and complete that. If I want to render my third component, let's add a space here. Two, two, two. So my 3, everything comes up. All right, any questions? Is everybody good? Everybody understand what is going on? It's just not the understanding part. I want you guys to type this out too. Again, most of the time what happens is I type in, and it happens to me. I'm looking at somebody's code and they're typing in front of me. I'm like, yeah, I get it. An hour later, I turn around and if say somebody says, hey, can you do the same thing? I'm like totally lost. I'm like, I have no idea how to start. I'm like, can you do it again? It's common. It is actually happening to me right now. We're working on some product and I'm like pair programming with somebody. Like, yeah, this looks easy. And then I go back to my desk. I'm like, what did you do? Yeah. So. Okay. Because I do what? Because never comment. Just don't comment your code. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Good. So you guys, of course, obviously see that this is not the proper way. I mean, we are. If there were 100 friends, you will have to keep one writing them out. So here, this is where our list and keys comes in. Okay, that's the next part. Take a look at list and keys and see if you can loop this array and create all the 3 or whatever the cards are. All right. Instead of hard coding 0, 1, and 2, look at the map function. So this would be in your list and keys. Okay. This is a function that we are going to use. So we are going to use a map function, and we are going to render our friend component by passing in all these properties, but inside a loop this time. Okay, it would be our map function. Remember, when you're using the map function, you need to pass an ID. Sorry, a key. If you don't pass a key, you will see that error in your console. Okay, so all of this will be run through your map function. So keep this over here and start working with it. Again, since map is a JavaScript function, remember you have to use curly braces. So everything it has to be inside this curly braces. You need to create curly braces. Use the friends. So friends.map. Okay. And then for each one, you're going to loop. You're going to create a copy of this one. So all of this code from 14 to 30 is going to go away. We'll be writing the loop in our curly braces. Again, why? Because JavaScript, so you need the curly braces. All right, so it's going to be friends.map. Okay, remember what does the map function do? It returns you the same number of elements in a different state though. Okay. It has 3 parameters. The second two are optional, so you don't have to worry about the second two parameters in your callback function for map. You can use just the first one. First one will give you a single element in that array. So friends dot map. Okay. So map expects a callback function. So let's go ahead and use our arrow syntax to write our callback function. All right. Takes in the callback takes in 3 arguments. The second two are optional, so we won't worry about. We will only worry about the first one, which will be each element inside the array. Okay, I'm going to call it friend. You can call it anything you want. Okay, since this is, I'm going to be using a single one, I'm going to remove these parentheses from here. Is my arrow function correct? No. Wrong arrows. Okay, what does this do? This is going to actually just do this. It is going to create a friend component, but this time it's not going to be hard-coded index, right? So we can remove, you can just do friend, 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 and friend. Again, why friend? Remember, this is what I'm calling each object. When my map loops through the array, each element is going to come and store themselves into this object, which I'm calling friend, and that's how I'm accessing each one of them. Okay, so since we already have a loop, we don't need all of these, so we can remove this. And then your code should still be working, and it should still show up all 3 of them. Okay. What am I missing? I'm missing the key. So if you go to your console, you will see that it's probably giving you an error. Not probably, it is definitely going to give you an error because I'm missing the key. Okay, so anytime you are using a map function, when you're looping in React using the map function, you need to provide a property called key, which has to be, generally it has to be unique. So we will say key is equal to something, and we do have a unique, which is the ID. Okay, so we will say friend dot ID, even though this is not being used in our friend component, but we still need it because otherwise React is going to complain. If you do this, still renders, no errors in the console. Look in the component, all my components are loading, 3 components, because I'm looping through, each one of them has the key. Okay, and then if you drill down into the component, you will see that all of this is being passed inside your component. Let's go back here. All right, any questions? Does everybody understand looping through an array using the map function? Any questions on the map function? Yes.
How come you use parentheses on that
So if you use curly braces, then you have to put the return. Parentheses is just saying this is one single line. Yeah, you can remove the. I'm just telling React that this whole thing is one single line. So it doesn't. If you have multiple lines, you have to put the curly braces and the return keyword. But if you look at it, React is smart enough to realize that this is like a single line. That's why. If you use curly braces, you will have to put a return statement. So for us to look at it nicely, that's why I have new lines, but actually React is rendering this whole thing in a single line. So this whole component is friend, key, name, image in a single line. That's why I don't need a return statement. All right, any questions? Is it making sense a little bit better? Okay. Everybody good? All right. So the next we are going to look at is state. Okay. So we will pause this over here. I'm going to come back to this example, but I will cover a basic state example, a very easy, straightforward one. No clock or anything. I'll just cover a button click one. Okay, and then we will come back over here, and then we will see how do we implement state over here. Okay, is that good? Okay, so let's prepare our next example. So I'm going to copy this over, and then I'm going to start fresh. So I will copy this source folder to a safe location. So I'm just going to go into my demo app, source, let's say friend app. I'm going to copy the source so that I have this, I can bring it back. Okay. Next, I'm just going to delete this source folder and then bring a fresh basic one. So put this one over. So this way I don't have to keep creating a new React app. No. Okay, doesn't like it. I'll copy it from, open this up in Visual Studio, starter source. Oh, there it is. Okay. Still rendering, so this should bring up, did I stop it? Yes, I did. So start this, start fresh. So we will be looking at number 26. Okay, looks like this is working. All right, so let's talk about a state. Again, what is the second portion is state is local to a component. All right, state lives and dies in a component, right? Nobody else outside the component knows about the state. If you pass in some data from a stateful component, it gets passed as a property. Remember that. Again, the state, the keyword state, only lives inside a component, right? The second thing, when you're creating a stateful component, it has to be a class component. Okay, so we'll create a basic example where there's a button on your screen which you click, the counter goes up. So you have a number and then a button. When you click this, the number goes up. Simple example, but very powerful. Why? Because you will not be able to render this page unless you are using state. Okay? We are modifying. Anytime you want to add anything dynamic to your page, anything that is taking user input, or anything that is going to change your page, remember that's where state comes in. Okay? If it is just for presentation, um, it doesn't really do anything. It just gets the data and displays it without any action. You would use a function component. You will pass the data using properties, and just you will use a function component, right? Function components are usually used for some kind of a presentation. It's not like a static page, but that's compared to function and a class component. Function component is mostly for like static content. You just show it, it takes the data, and then just shows. It doesn't do anything. If you want your page to be more dynamic, interaction, changes something, that's where the state comes in. Okay, so we'll create a, this is my basic one. I'll create my component folder, components, yes. This is 26. Yeah, but don't look at the activity. Look, code everything out. So what we are trying to do is we are making a number on our screen and a button. And when you click that button, it goes up by 1. Okay. So the first thing we will do is create our oops. Let's go ahead and create our component files. Okay. Now we have already seen, we have determined that this is going to be a stateful component. So I have to create a class component. All right. And when I say a class component, there are a few things that you will be doing. The first would be import. You're going to import React, and then an additional module, which is called component from React. Okay. Whenever you are creating a class component, it requires 2 modules that need to be imported: React, the library of course, and then a module called component. All right. Every time you create a class component, this is the requirement. The class component is not going to work if you do not import these. That's the first step. The next step is you create a class. All right. You will say class, just like your function component name. You will name it your component name counter, and then you have this keyword called extends component. Close this class. Okay. Remember from our constructor class, component is also a class. Okay, but where is this class? This class is part of your React package. React is giving you a built-in class called component. When you say extends, this is basically saying there are some functionality that resides in this class. Bring me or give me that functionality as well. Okay, so extends basically is saying, hey, go into this React component. It has some built-in functions, some functionality, some good things. I want to use them as well. So this is why you will say class, your name of your component, extends component. Right, this will bring you some functions, and we'll take a look at what those functions are. Yes. Yes.
Why take out the get rid of the comma and only
What is it?
like the syntax of it? If they're both modules.
Oh, yes. Good, good. I was wondering if somebody is going to ask this question ever. Why is this going on? Okay, so here's this comes from. Remember when you do a export default counter, how do you import this in your app? It's import counter just like this. Do you use curly braces? You do not, right? This is a difference. If you have a default word in your class or function component, you can import it without these curly braces. Okay? If you do not have this default keyword, you have to put it into these curly braces and then import this component. Okay? Now, with that definition, the React, the whole library, has a export default called React, but it is also exporting a lot more components. The reason is you can only have one default in your component. You cannot have more than one default. All right. So if you want to export something else, you will have to use the word export something else, but you cannot use the word default. Only one default is allowed in a component. Okay. So by default, since this is more widely used, React is saying by default, they probably have, if you look up your code, you can go to GitHub and actually look at this library. They have export default React, but they also have export component, export React DOM, export React router, and they have a lot more libraries. Okay. This is saying this is absolutely necessary, so that's why they have it default. These are all optional. Am I making a function component? If I am, I don't need this component, right? So that's why this can be skipped. But I'm making a class component, that's why I need this component. You will see once we get to a few more libraries, it will be more components that we can load. Okay, right now we are just using class, so it kind of stops over here. But this has React DOM, React Router. They have a lot more libraries that are built in. That's the reason.
So does that mean that if they were to have exported React without the default keyword, then both React
Yes,
components
exactly. Yes. Yeah. If they had imported React without the default keyword, you would do that. Okay. Again, remember this and give it a try. Create a component with a default keyword, without the default keyword, import in your app and see how it works. Okay. It's all documented. Again, export this thing is not part of React. It is actually part of ES6 JavaScript. Okay. You can use this in any your regular JavaScript as well. Okay, it's kind of similar to your node exports or node imports. Okay, required keyword. All right. Finally, thank you. I was wondering if somebody is ever going to ask this question. Okay. All right. So we have stubbed this out. Any questions so far? Okay. So the next thing is we have created a class component, so we know we are going to create a state. All right. The second thing is go ahead and just create a variable state. Now, when I'm creating a function component, I'm passing props. Does it have to be called props? No. But when I'm creating my class component, does it have to be called state? Yes. State is the only keyword that React is going to recognize. So you have to make it call it state. Okay. You will notice I'm not using the constructor. I'm going to skip to that part. Maybe I spoke too soon and I showed you how we get to this part. Maybe that was more confusing, but I'll keep it simple. I'll start with a simpler syntax. But please remember, go back to my lecture. There are some reasons why we are able to use this function. These are new capabilities in ES6. If this ever goes away, you will not be able to use it in this way. For now, we'll keep it simple. This is how you declare a state. Okay. Second thing, state is always going to be an object. All right. It cannot be a string, a number, or a bool or anything. It has to be an object. Within the state, you will have variables that the state is going to watch. Okay. For example, over here, we are creating a counter. So we will say, this is what my state is going to be on. Okay. So what am I saying over here? I'm saying every time the variable count changes, please re-render the page. Something has happened. You need to reload the page. Okay. So anything that is declared inside the state object, right? Anytime that thing changes, your page is going to get rendered. Is everybody clear on that? Right now, I have only one property, count. So anytime that count changes, my page is going to get re-rendered. Clear? Okay. Now, the second thing you have to do when you create a property inside your state, you have to give an initial value, right? I have a count. My initial value is 0. Let's suppose I have a name property. I'm going to give it a empty string. So when you declare your state, the first time you have to give it an initial value. Okay? It could be 0, it could be null, it could be empty, it could be some string that you want to show up over here, whatever it is. But anything that you mention in this variable over here, it is considered as initial state. Okay? So you create a state object, mention what state, what your page is going to be watching for, give it an initial value. Okay? Now, this component class over here gives you a lot of methods built in. Okay? All of them are optional except one. And that one function is called render. Every single class that you make that extends from this React component needs to have a function called render. Otherwise, going to give you an error. Okay? There are, I think, 10 or 11 functions, but all of them are optional. There's only one that is mandatory, and that function is called render. So every class that extends from component needs to have a function called render. Okay, so next time when I say stub out your class component, you're going to start with import React and component. You're going to use a class keyword extended from component. All right, create a state variable, and then have this function called render. Okay, just like your properties, function properties, render, return something, which is going to be our JSX. So for now, we will put our div tags, put it in new lines like this. Okay, all right, any questions? Yes.
Sorry, I missed what you said. Why do you need the render with the class but not with the function?
Because function component itself is a function. A class can have functions and variables, right? Okay. Function component itself is just a function. So you're basically defining function within a function, which is not there. But in a class, remember, go back to the constructor one. In a class, you will have class properties, functions. So that's why you need the function called render. Okay, within a function component, it's just a whole function, so it's already there. So you don't have to. If you create a function, it will be a function within a function, which, I mean, if you want, it's possible, but it's not required because it's already a function component. A class component, class kind of hosts, kind of has properties, fields, and functions. So you have to mention something. A class itself is nothing, but a class needs to have some functions, some fields to make it working. So that's why you need this, a function. Now, why do you need the render function? Because it is imposed by this keyword over here. When you do extends component, this is coming from React, and React is saying, I have 11 functions. You can ignore all of them, but you cannot ignore render. You have to define a function called render. Again, the reason is when your state changes, this is the function that gets called. So if you don't define this function, your React component doesn't know what to do. So anytime your state is going to change, this function React is going to look for exactly this function with this syntax, and then it's going to call this function. Doesn't exist, you won't be able to render. You'll get an exception saying, I think it will say render not found or something. I'm not sure.
So the render is only used when we're dealing with state.
Render is only used when you are dealing with state. This whole syntax that you see is only used when you're doing state. You can use properties here as well, but if you have a function component, none of these things matter. There is a render, if you remember, we are doing a return in our function components. That's what gets called. But in this case, you have to specify a function so that React component knows which one to call.
Okay, and the render, that's a function that was written by like the people who wrote React.
Yeah, it's inside this. If you open this up, look into GitHub, you will find the render function inside this class. Yeah, it's coming from there. Even this variable state, remember we are not declaring state. This state is also mentioned somewhere in the component, so we are just overriding this state. Okay? All right. Any other questions? Everybody good? Okay. So within our return statement, just go ahead and create some div tag. Create a. Let's see. What do we need? You can create an H1 and then label and a button. Okay. So I'm going to create an H1, simple H1, and I'll just say click counter as a heading. This would be the title, and then I'm just going to create a p tag, and then this will have my click count, and I'm going to refer to this count over here. Okay, we'll come back and complete that, and then I will have a button. This will be called click me. Okay, that's all I'm doing, right? So this should render a button on your page, and then a heading, click counter, and then click count. Okay, now what do I want to show on my page? I want to show this variable over here. Okay, how do I refer to this variable? I would say this, since it's inside the class, you need the keyword this. So it's going to be this. This count is inside the state object, so it has to be this dot state dot count. Okay, doesn't look right. Why is that? Excellent. It needs parentheses. Since this is JavaScript, I need to wrap it out into just like your props. Okay, any questions? Everybody good? All right, so when you render your page, what should show up? A 0 should show up. Why? Because when you render your page, it comes up, it looks for this.state.count. What is the value of count? 0, 0 will show up. Changes to 10, then render your page, 10 will show up. So let's go ahead and test this out. So we'll go into our app, import this variable, counter. Okay. Now when my page comes up, I should see a 0. Okay. If you change this to something else, what should show up? The number initial value. Again, why is this working? Because I'm saying render this page and get this value from the state, whatever the initial state is right now, whatever the value of count is. Right now, the value of count is 23, so it shows up 23. Okay? For now, this is something that you can still do with a property, right? You can pass a props with a hard-coded value, and you can do it, right? The next thing is where it comes from is how do you increment, how do you change the state? Okay, that's what is going to add more dynamic activity to your page. For this, what we are going to do, we're going to say on click this function over here on the button click, we are going to increase the counter. Whatever the value of counter was previously, we're going to add 1 to it. Okay, simple thing. So this thing, click me, so we need a click handler function. Let's do it in a new line. Okay, so the property is called on click. Let me come back over. Okay, so remember this is called event handling. How do you handle events in React? React has built-in event handlers. For button, they have on click, mouse over, and all those events. Go into the React library. You can see handling events. If you want to see a detailed description of what other events are available, go into API reference and then look under synthetic event. Okay, Just to give you, I'm not trying to confuse you, but synthetic event is a module that React has made. And I mean, it's kind of not visible to us. We don't really care about it. But when you are calling your events, it is actually referring to a library called synthetic event. And this is a React library that they are using for event handling. Okay. But if you scroll down, you will see all the events mentioned, what they have over here. Okay. All of these are supported. So you can take a look at this. This is under API reference and synthetic event. For now, for a button click, we will just stick to on click. Okay. Simple JavaScript jQuery have an on click instead of the regular one. And then what does on click expect? On click is expecting a function with that has one argument with just one argument. That's all on click is expecting. Okay. Remember jQuery and JavaScript. When you are handling events, you need to pass in a function. Okay. So what is on click expecting? You need to give it a function that has one argument or no arguments. Okay. At most one argument. All right. So let's do that. We are going to create a function over here. We are going to use our arrow key function, arrow syntax, and we'll create a function called handle click arguments body. Okay, since I'm going to be calling this in my on click event, remember it is expecting a single argument. All right, I'm going to call it e event. Let's call it event. It's a complete name. Okay. So what does this do? It calls this this function handle click and passes some data into this variable called event over here. Okay, we won't be using event right now, but that's how your event handler functions work. Okay, all the event handler functions that are in React require a function with at most one argument, 0 or 1. Cannot be 2, cannot be 3, cannot be 4. Has to be 0 or 1. Okay, you can pass in 2 is going to ignore the second one. It only looks for a single argument. Right now, does this function qualify for our event handler? It does, because this function has only one argument, so I can pass this. I can tell this thing to do this. So what is going to happen when somebody clicks this button? It's going to go ahead and look for this function, which is defined over here, and it's going to execute whatever the function is, whatever the function body has. Right now it's empty, so it doesn't really do anything. Just to test it out, you can say alert handle click was clicked. Okay, now if you go ahead and run your while I struggle with formatting. So if you go back and render this page, you should see a button. When you click it, the alert should show up. Okay, so if you go back over here, click me, alert shows up. Okay, what does this mean? This means this is working. On my click event, I said go and call this function, and this is my function over here. Nice and simple. All right, any questions? Remember, I'm not using constructor, I'm not using bind, I'm not using regular function syntax. Those are good things to know. I would highly recommend, please look at the documentation or go back to the video, the concept that I talked about. Those will show that you have deeper understanding why this is working and why the other syntax doesn't work. But for now, just to keep it simple, if you are using arrow functions the way I'm using it, you will not face the issue that I was referring when I initially introduced this concept. Okay, I was hoping you guys would understand, but I don't know, maybe look into JavaScript a little bit more. It has to do with scoping issues. It is absolutely necessary as a JavaScript programmer that you understand how JavaScript works. Okay, again, look at the React. They have included this concept in their React documentation over here. So if you go back to your handling states in life cycle and handling events, you will see they have mentioned um, all these things over here. Okay, I covered this, but for now we'll keep it simple. This is how you would do. If you follow this syntax, you will not run into that issue. But again, if you are familiar with this, once you're comfortable with this, please go back and read the concepts, understand why one works and why doesn't one doesn't work. Okay, we'll parking lot that for now. Any questions on this? Does everybody understand how to handle events in React? How do you declare the state? The last thing is how do you update the state? Okay, if you want to update the state, remember I said the only way to update a state in a class component is using the method called set state. Okay, of course set state comes from the component library and it is called set state, and in the argument it takes an object. Okay, inside that object you will pass in whatever state you are doing. So what I'm saying is every time somebody clicks, I'm going to remove that, I'm going to update my state variable count. Okay, so I will say set state. Okay, intentionally I'm leaving out the this keyword, but again remember it has to be this dot set state. Visual Studio is nice if you say set state or any one that it recognizes. Again, why is Visual Studio recognizing these methods? Because you have done extends component, so it is bringing all these methods that exist inside this module over here. Okay, so you will say set state, but it has to be this dot set state. Okay, takes a single argument, which is going to be an object. Within that object, you will pass in your state variable, okay, which is going to be count. So what do you pass in inside your set state? You pass in the new value that you want your variable to have. Okay, for example, I want my count variable to have a new value which is going to be my old value of count from the state and then 1 added to it. Okay, what does this do? It reads the current value that is in your state.count. For example, when the count starts, it's going to read 23. It's going to go over here, add 1 to it, update this variable. So next time it's going to become 24. So on your screen, you will see this dot state dot count. As soon as you update this set state, your page is going to re-render. It's going to go back over here, look at this value, this will be 24. All right, let's do this one more time. So when your page loads, the initial value is 23. All right, your page loads. This is not called, it goes over here, it says 23, shows up. When you click this button, it goes and updates the state and it gets 23 plus 1, adds it, the state changes. Remember, as soon as the state changes, your render function is going to get fired again. So state change, your render function gets fired again, comes over here, this time the state count is 24, and that's how your variable 24 shows up. So if you go back over here, 23, because my initial value is 23, all right, click 24, and it keeps going down. Refresh this page, comes back to 23. Why? Because you reloaded the whole page, so it comes back to 23. Any questions? Does everybody understand how state is working? So if I said add a new button, add a new state variable, or use the same variable, and this time when you click that button, the value goes down. Would that make sense now? Give it a try. Let's take a few minutes. Create a new button. Create a new handler. But this time, what you're doing is you are using the same state variable, but this time the count is going down.
So whenever I did the increment function, I didn't pass in the init. And
Over here?
yeah.
Yeah. As I said, it's 0 or 1. So either you don't pass anything or you pass 1. Yeah. But if you pass more than 1, those are going to be ignored. Yeah, so that's why it works. Yeah, so it can be empty or it can have this thing. Yeah, that's option. But you cannot pass in. I mean, you can pass in more, it won't do anything, it won't send anything. You might actually get an error. Let's see if you pass in more than 1. Okay. Yeah. Doesn't give any error, but what will happen is you won't be able to use this. If you try to send something, you won't be able to access it. Again, because you cannot pass in any arguments over here. So, okay, so you guys do something similar. Add another button. Oops. Okay. Event handler. So on click expects a function. It needs to have a single argument. So something like handle click, you can say handle increment needs to have 0 or 1 argument. Intentionally, I will create one with no arguments just to show you guys this also works. But in this case, what is going to happen? I'm then going to call this over here handle increment. Okay. In this case, what happens? You update the state. So we need the set state method. All right. Takes in 1 argument, which is going to be an object. And this time I'm saying this dot state get the current value of count and decrease. Okay, so if you go back over here, okay, so goes up, goes down. All right, just remember anything that is going to be changing on your web page, it is being done through state. Okay, if you want to render something new, you want to keep updating, user interaction, anything, it is all done using state. Okay. All right, any questions? Clear? Good? Is it better? Okay. So let's do the last activity. We'll go back to our friends one. And this time we are going to add state to our friends component. Okay. Now, in our current scenario, state doesn't make sense, right? Because I'm just rendering 3 cards on my page, right? So what we are going to do is we are going to add a functionality of deleting the card. Okay. So this is your card. You have your image and few things over. Okay. So you're going to add this X, a button or a label or anything. And when somebody clicks that X, your card should be deleted. Of course, we know it's an array, so it's going to be only deleted from memory, but it should go away from that array. Okay? Is there interaction? There is, right? When you click the X button, there's events going on, so we need a state. Okay? So think about that few minutes and see how would you take this example and implement state over here. So in your friend card, you will have the X button. When you click that, it should go away from the screen. It should basically delete it from the array. So you're going to delete, you are going to remove that object from the array and then re-render the page without that element. So we need state. I would recommend creating first of all, create a class component, stub it out, okay? So create a class component. So you already have your app and everything. Create within app, create a class component. Just call it friends container. We will call it friends container class. Create this. And we are going to move all of our components beneath this friends container. We're going to maintain state in our friend container, and then we're going to move our objects around. All right, so the first thing is create a class called friend container, stub it out, and then we'll see how do we come to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring back my example. I'm going to delete this, and then okay, there's my friend component. Just make sure this is still working. Okay, that's good. Close this out. Okay. So in your component, you're going to create a class component called friend container. So create a folder, friend container. I'm going to say friend container.js. Okay. First thing, we're going to import React and component. That's React. Okay. And then we're going to create our class. So class friend container extends component. Okay. Export default friend container. Okay. Let's see how do we add a X to my component. So it looks like they are using span, so we'll kind of use the same thing. So in my card component, we have our div, we have our image, and then after content, let's go ahead and add span tag. Okay. And this span tag is going to have an X. Simple X. Okay, we'll be filling this out. Okay, there's a class name that we can add here. It's called remove. So I'm going to add this CSS remove. I think it brings it out as red or something. Let's take a look at it. Oh no, it's at the bottom. Is it outside the... Did I mess this up? Class name remove. Maybe there is a remove CSS. Okay. So I'm going to bring over the CSS. Okay. So we are looking at example number 20, activity number 28. Okay. So you can go to the friends card component and copy over the CSS. They have a CSS for remove. So what would happen is when you render this X, it will show up as this thing. Doesn't work, but this will do for now. Okay. So come back over. So what are we doing? We have an array, and then when somebody clicks this, we want this to be deleted. Okay. So our array is changing, right? So what do we have to store in our state? The array, right? Why? Because every time the array changes, I want this page to be rendered. Every time I remove something from my array, I need this page to be re-rendered. Does that make sense? So you're going to put something in the state which is going to be changed. So in this case, my array is going to change. So let's go ahead and add a state variable. Okay, state. All right, and this is going to have a single friends array. Oops. Okay, we'll keep it empty for now. We'll pass the friends array in. All right, we will go ahead and import that array inside over here, and then initialize with that. Okay, so for example, one way you can do is import friends from your JSON file, which was, is it on the same path? It is dot dot slash. So it's going to be dot dot slash, and then friends dot JSON. Okay, let's do this. So this state is referring to the array that I'm importing, and where am I importing? I'm importing the whole array from our JSON file. Okay. The other way would be you can pass this in as properties, but we won't go over there for now. We'll just take the whole array, and when somebody clicks, we will remove it over here and then re-render our page. Okay, so far so good. All right, I think it's something similar that you guys would be doing for your homework. All right, so what is one function that is required? It's the render function. So we will type in our render function here. Okay, and what does render do? It has to return JSX. So we will for now move our div. Okay. So this is the concept we did it in the previous class, but when you have state and when you have a lot more components, try to see if you can have a single component that has state, or minimum number of components that can control the state. If you have a lot of components that have states in them. Remember, states are isolated. My friend container, this state is only visible over here. If I have another component with a state, that state is only visible in that component. You cannot see any other thing. Okay. Usually, what happens is, and it happens. There are a lot more components that need different state, but they soon become like out of sync. What do I mean by out of sync is, you are updating a state over here, the other component has no idea. You have to pass it as a properties and tell that component, hey, go ahead and render yourself. And then you have to tell other component, go and render yourself. So it kind of creates a problem. But in this class, in your project, I highly doubt you will ever reach that problem. It's more on a big scale problem. But in our case, it's good to make sure that we have a single component that is kind of controlling the state. In this case, we have created a friend container, and I'm going to say that this is the main container class which has the state, and everybody, if there's any changes in the state, everybody is going to come and talk to this component over here. Okay, so initially in my app, my app had wrapper, title, and this. So what I'm going to say is, we have created a friend container. So our app is going to now talk to the friend container, and friend container is going to manage all of this. Okay, and why is this? Remember, your friend card has an X over there. It has to know about the array and everything. So somebody has to be controlling the state. Okay, so what we are going to do is we are going to take all of this and bring it into our friend container, and our app.js is only going to have a single component called friend container, which is going to have a state inside it. Okay, everything will be controlled from the friend container, right? I know this might be a little bit confusing. Let's take a look at it. Okay, there's another activity, kind of do something similar, but we'll complete this one. Okay, so what do I mean is, let's take this up. We are going to put it into our, okay, now everything is kind of messed up, so let's go ahead and we don't need any of these. Okay, we only need our friend container. Okay, right, let's go back over here. This is good. Let's go back over. Okay, so let's go ahead and import these. Will it automatically import it for me? No. Okay. I don't recognize it. All right, let's go ahead and import these. So it's going to be import wrapper from dot slash wrapper slash wrapper. Okay, so import title from dot slash title slash title.js. Okay, what is the last one? Is our friend card from dot slash dot slash friend card slash. Okay, and everything else remains the same for now. So what is the first thing? Will this work? Friends.map. This is not going to work. Why not? I have a state variable with friends, which is referring to that array. So anytime my page renders, I want to make sure that this is actually reading from the state and not like a random variable. Okay, so the first thing would be, you would go ahead and change this to this dot state dot friends. Okay, now it is going to loop through this array and it should show up your components. Let's see what the error is. Cannot resolve dot friends JSON. Okay. So that's why, because this is inside components and no, what am I doing? Oh, yeah, I've forgotten how to navigate. All right, so from this is friends container, so I need to go back one up. It comes to components and oh yeah, isn't this correct? Cannot resolve dot slash friends. Or is it two? Oh, showed up. Did, right? Yes. Friends dot just okay, there we go. So at this point everything should still be working and it should still show up. Okay, so what we did, we changed our function component basically into a state function, into a class component. Okay, my array is now controlled by state, so that's why I'm referring to this dot state dot friends. Everything else remains the same. All right, any questions before we move on to the remove thing? Okay, so what is going on over here? My friends has, let's go back to our friend card. We have a span tag over here, right? This is basically, we are going to make it act like a button, right? Kind of shows up like this. So what do we need? We need on click function. So let's go ahead and look at your example that we just completed and we will bring our on click functionality. Okay, so in this case, on click, okay, and on click expects a on click expects a function. Okay, now remember this is my function component. I don't have any more functions, I don't have anything. Okay, this is it. So how do I do this? I will have to pass a function as a property. Right now we are passing fields as a property. You can also pass functions as properties. Okay, what does this mean? You can have a function over here, for example, create a function called remove friend. Okay, in our class component. So you will say remove friend. For now, let's keep it empty. You need something and then something. Okay, so what can we do over here? We can say pass this function, create a new property. Let's say remove friend. Okay, what am I going to pass over there? I'm going to pass this dot remove friend. Okay, now what is happening over here? So I am passing properties to my friend card. Okay, I am passing this property, this property, this property. These are all strings, and ID is a number actually. Okay, now instead of passing strings, you can also pass functions to your properties as properties. Okay, how do we do that? I created a function called remove friend, and I'm passing this into this thing. Okay, now my friend card is going to receive all the properties. It is also going to receive a property called remove friend, which is a function. It doesn't know, but it just knows that it's going to receive a function called remove friend. And how do we access this function? Same way as we access other properties. Props dot remove, was it remove friend? remove friend. Okay, it is a function, so we will put it over here, no string. Okay, so two things that are happening over here. Props can also accept functions. Okay, so what are we doing? We have a friend container which has all the state and everything. What it is saying that if you want to change a state, call this function, but the function is going to reside with me. I'm going to give you that function. If you want to do something, just call this function. I'll take care of it. So I'm passing this function as a property down to my friend component. Okay, what will happen when you click an X is going to go ahead and call this function. Okay, and where is this function? This function is being passed down from here. So it's going to basically call whatever is over here. So you can put a alert and say remove friend. Yeah, sure. Remove friend called. Oops. Okay. Oops. Okay. So we go back over here. So it's stuck in a infinite loop or something. Remove friend called. All right. So what is in what?
On the front part. Take off the parentheses.
Take off which parentheses?
Yeah.
This thing? Oh. Okay. Thank you. Let's go back and reload this. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, I don't know why I did parentheses. All right. So if you click this, this pops up. Click this, this pops up. Okay. Let's go back. Any questions? We'll take a pause over here and we'll complete it next time. But you can actually go ahead and complete this activity on your own as well. This was the main part. Okay, we are passing functions as properties. Again, these is over here because the state is controlled by friend container. We don't want any other component to have state. All right. Again, the main reason is if you have too many components with different states, it's not able to sync and you will run into more issues. So what we try to do is we try to look at the hierarchy, we look at the tree and see where where the state would make more logical sense. So what we did over here, we have our app component, then we have our friend container. Our friend container has the state, makes sure everything is good, and then within it has wrapper, title, and then our friend card. Okay? Any questions? Was this session helpful? Is it better? Okay? Again, you guys come inside it, you guys are going to forget everything. Please go back and look at this activity. Do it on your own. When you come to Saturday, we'll continue on this revision and we have few more to complete. Okay? Alright, it's not going to happen again. This is the only time. Alright, see you guys on Saturday.